This is the Asia Climate Finance Podcast. The series is dedicated to the discussion and analysis of business and finance trends around the energy transition and decarbonisation in Asia, the largest energy consuming region in the world. Hello and welcome to the 20th episode of the Asia Climate Finance Podcast. We recorded the podcast on the 31st of October 2022. I am your host and producer of the show, Joseph Giacobelli. Today's guest is Nicolas Leong. Nicolas is the Energy Business Director for North and Southeast Asia at Wärtsilä Energy, and he's based in Tokyo, although our conversation was when he was traveling and he was speaking out of Singapore. In the discussion, we first look at Wärtsilä as a great case study of a company heavily involved in the energy transition and decarbonization in Asia. And after that, I ask Nicolas for some of his thoughts about Japan and what's going on there on the clean energy front, as well as his thoughts on some other Asian jurisdictions. Hello, Nicolas, and I'm really grateful that you could make it today for the Asia Climate Finance Podcast. How's the weather down in Singapore?
Good morning, Joseph. Yeah, weather is great, despite being a Monday. So look forward for the week. Yeah, great stuff.
Well, I know that you've been you're in between places in terms of travel, so I really appreciate you making the time. And could we start perhaps first about you? Could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Thanks, Joseph. Yeah, originally I'm from Mauritius, the beautiful island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. Then moved to Singapore for my studies, France, and then started to work in Singapore in the US. And then about close to 8 years ago, I joined Wärtsilä. So being started as a business development manager for Southeast Asia, and about 2 years ago, I moved to Japan, and now I'm heading the energy business for Wärtsilä for the North and Southeast Asia. And so far, that has been a very exciting journey for me and for the team. So as you know, we are trying to help our customer to navigate through this energy transition that every company or the whole country in the world actually are facing today.
And talking about that, Nicolas, how did you kind of get involved, or how did you become a participant in the the whole kind of Asia net zero game, the energy transition, etc.?
Well, thanks for the question. I think, Joseph, let's see first how Wärtsilä what Wärtsilä is doing. So Wärtsilä, we call ourselves, we are technology provider. We are actually helping customers with two things. So number one, with our grid balancing gas engine, and two, with the energy storage system. So we basically are providing flexible technology to our customers. And now, when we talk about energy transition, it's all about, going renewable, right? Having more and more renewable in the mix, right? And then you can try to decommission those inflexible assets. But the thing is that we all know that, and also you certainly know that with clean energy, wind and solar, these are not 100%. They're intermittent, right? So then countries need to ask themselves, what are you going to do when the sun doesn't shine? And what you are going to do when the wind doesn't blow, right? And that's where flexibility comes in. That's where flexibility is needed to act as a backup or as a balancer, I would say, to the renewable. So for us, Wärtsilä, we believe that we are the enabler to help countries to integrate more renewable in the system. So that's how myself and Wärtsilä and our team here in Asia and in the whole Asia Pacific, actually, we are trying to help the customers to realize that, well, in order to achieve net zero, in order to achieve decarbonization, you can't do it overnight. decarbonization is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And that's why we call it energy transition, because it takes time to transition, right? It takes time to change. It's not going to happen overnight. And that's where we believe that, having flexible technology does help you to actually to perhaps accelerate that journey towards net zero.
Okay. I mean, you mentioned, your company a couple of times, and I think, well, obviously I know Wärtsilä, but I'm not sure if, everybody listening actually knows the company. And I think it's one of those like really big, significant companies and significant players that if you're not involved in energy, nobody's ever heard of it. It's not like a Sony or a Samsung, which is, doing TVs and telephones. So could you maybe just give us a little bit of background on the company, number one, and two, I think the strategy and what Wärtsilä is doing is really interesting. So if you don't mind, after that, I want to dig into a little bit into the kind of historical strategy and future strategies. But could you tell us a little bit about the background of the company? What exactly do you do?
Well, Wärtsilä is a 185-year-old company from Finland. The company is started as a manufacturer, we're OEM of engines. So in the past, I think people know Wärtsilä about Wärtsilä diesel. We have diesel engine, and now we focus more on gas engine, and we are present in two sectors, so energy and marine. And I think people know Wärtsilä more on the marine side, right? They know Wärtsilä because one in two ships sailing around the world are actually using Wärtsilä or propulsion systems, so cruise, tankers, carriers, you name it. So that's where a lot of seafarers know Wärtsilä, marine people know Wärtsilä, right? But then many years back, maybe 50 years ago, they decided that why not put that engine, that gas engine on land and actually to produce electricity. So that's how the energy business started. And of course, back then, we had what we call the smart power generation. We were just supporting customers, captive, grid-connected utilities, industrial, right? So we were really doing that, and we have been being able to support a lot of customers who needed flexible base load in the area. But then, the energy transition come, and then about 5 years ago, Wärtsilä acquired a company called Greensmith. So that's where Greensmith brought, let's say, the energy storage capability. So with that, Wärtsilä became a system integrator in the space, because Greensmith had this EMS, which is the energy management system. So we call it GEM, so Greensmith Energy Management System, and that software is able to basically help to make let's say energy storage smart. So maybe the way for the audience to understand what is an EMS, so it's very simple. Let me explain to you. So basically, everyone has an iPhone, right, or an Android, right? So think about it that's your, let's say, your hardware, right? Your batteries, your camera, right? But then you need a software, and that's where you have your iOS, right? That's where you have all your apps and all this, how to use WhatsApp, how to use the weather forecast. So you can think about, let's say, our GEMS, our EMS, like the EOS of your iPhone, basically. So that's what makes it smart, right? Because then, when you have an energy storage system, you want to actually to charge it when the price is the lowest, right? And to discharge when the price is the highest, right? And you make money. And then you need to also help customer to make money about, when you do frequency control. So that's kind of, let's say, people don't realize that the value of software, right? And that's why we, Wärtsilä, through the acquisition of Greensmith, is helping customers with the energy storage system, but yet having a powerful software. The GEMS actually does help, because many people now in the industry think that, well, you can buy batteries, you can buy inverters, put them together, and you will have energy system storage. But I think it's far more than that. So coming back to your question, so that's why really now we are really trying to support our customer on these two approach, either looking at, if they need flexible gas engine, or this smart energy storage system. But you may ask me, how do you sell this? And I think you wanted to know about our approach. I think for us, Wärtsilä, we are trying to take more like a holistic approach where we look at the country, we look at the energy mix, and then we look at what we do system modeling. Basically, we look at the whole system, and then we see how each of those technology, should operate, because every country is different. Some country has a lot of renewable, some country doesn't have. Some country has constraint in terms of gas, LNG. Some has land constraint. They can't have too much solar, like Singapore. Then when you do that kind of system modeling, then you're able to see how can they achieve net zero by a certain time. Because when we had last year we had the COP, right? Then they in Glasgow, then they were talking about, each country came, I'm going to pledge to reach net zero by 2030 or 2035 or 2050. Then this is where you can put all that in a model, and then let's see, and then from there that they will tell you the result. Okay, but if you want to achieve net zero by a certain time, this is what you need to do. This is what you're just not supposed to do. So Wärtsilä, really, we are taking this kind of, let's say, modeling-based approach to support our customer. We are not a consultant, but yet we believe that that's how we can add value to our customer, so that they really can achieve their goal. And that's what Wärtsilä is doing. We're trying to help customer to navigate through that energy transition journey, and that's how we have been trying to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the herd, I would say.
Going back to a couple of things you mentioned, Nicolas, if I can, on the energy storage front, what kind of energy storage are you talking about? Just not just, but is it battery based, or is it other systems? So could you talk a little bit about energy storage that you guys do?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure, of course. We so far focus on battery energy storage. Of course, there's other type of storage like pump hydro, etc. But for us, we are focusing on those battery for the time being. And of course, for us, we are system integrator. We always look out on let's say other technologies. So I think now the market it's right now all are focusing on the lithium-ion technology. But of course, in the future, for us as a technology provider, we are out of the market, on the lookout in the market. And of course, if there's a technology in the future that calls for maybe longer duration storage, Wärtsilä can have a look. And I think that's where the energy storage market is right now. Now it's a bit like 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hour system, but I think that as we go forward in that journey, maybe there could be a need for longer duration storage. But that's where the gas engine come in, because gas actually is also like a storage, right? Because you can.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about the gas. Because
exactly. So actually, gas. Talking about that, Joseph, good point, and that's why we believe that the role of gas will change, because in the past, right, it was always base load is the gas, right? And I think in the past, at power gen, people always talk about how efficient is your engine, how efficient is your turbine, how efficient, right? And of course, bigger the better, right? But now you can see, the discussion has changed. Now people always talk about how flexible is, how fast can you ramp up, all because of renewable. Because these days, having a plant that runs base load, a gas base load plant, I think is getting very rare, right? So that's why now people talk about flexible blades or flexible gas. And that's where, gas, LNG will be, for us, for me at least, I see it as a transition fuel. It will help that transition, and you still need gas. You still need gas, and gas role will change from the base load that everyone used to know in the past, to, let's say, this transition fuel, or you can call it backup fuel, to support renewable.
I think it's quite key. And if I remember correctly from reading about what your company does, you're also able to do very small plants gas kind of flex gen, and also, you can also ramp that up. You can do different sizes, right? And can you explain a little bit about that, if I'm correct? Because I'm definitely not a technical guy at all. I'm just a stupid finance guy. But could you explain a little bit, the difference? And I totally agree with you that whether we're going to have gas baseload by 2050 around the region, if we do, it's going to be very very limited. But it is an important kind of bridging fuel, right? So yeah, could you talk a little bit about these different kind of sizes of
Yeah, sure, no problem. Let me, it's fine. I'm also not a technical expert, and let me try to explain it. So I think for Wärtsilä, we have different size of engine. So we have the smaller size 4 megawatt, and then you have 10, 11, 12, and then of course you have the bigger one at 18. But I think to make it simple to understand, let's talk about 100 megawatt. Let's say you have a 100 megawatt needs, right? So instead of having one big turbine of 100 megawatt, you could then have, 6 engine of 18 megawatt or 10 units of 10 megawatt. So it's really like modular, right? So 10 units. So what you will do is, for example, if today you need 100 megawatt, right? Everything is running, full load, right? But if tomorrow, right, for some reason you need only 50 megawatt, right? If you have one unit, Joseph, what will you do? You will run that whole turbine or whole, equipment at 50% load, right? Correct? And your efficiency will be port load, and you will not get the full efficiency. But what on the engine side for Wärtsilä, what we can do is, instead of ramping all the 10 engine at 50%, we shut down 5 engine. We only run 5 engine at 100%. So basically, that's where you have the flexibility and the modularity. Means that we can shut down all 9 engine. 9 engine, we keep one running, so you can have 10. And the 10 engine 10 megawatt, that can run, up to 1 megawatt. So really, you have a range of that. And that's where you have this flexibility, right? And I think that's where then you can save fuel, right? You can save, cost, because, like you say, you can imagine it as your car engine, right? When you need it, you ramp up. When you don't need it, you ramp. So that's why in the US, in Texas, where you have the wind corridor, we call our gas engine power plant, we call it wind chaser. We chase the wind. It means that when you have a lot of wind, we shut down the engine. But when you have no wind, in 1 minute, we ramp up, because we can ramp up from 0% to 100% load in less than 2 minutes. So that's where we just, if you look at the curve of that gas engine, it will be doing like that, right? It really follow the wind. So that's where, this is something that, we are there, because if you use all the technology that's not able to ramp fast, by the time you want to ramp, maybe you're not needed anymore. So that's something that make the beauty of the the Wärtsilä technology.
Yeah, like you were saying, given that when there's at night you don't have solar power, and when there's no wind you don't have wind power, it's very, very important to have some kind of backup system. So if you've got the energy storage plus this kind of flexible generation, flex gen, then you can cover that. Just moving on to talking a little bit about, and again, I want to make this about you and your experience, not talking about solely about Wärtsilä, but I think what Wärtsilä is doing is quite interesting and quite important, and you're part of it, and you're developing it. But in terms of the energy transition, decarbonization, the move towards net zero, can you talk about a little bit what the company's approach has been? I seem to remember that you also produced, the company produced a white paper to net zero, something called the 5 steps, if I recall correctly.
Correct, exactly. That's you're right. So if I'm, so what Wärtsilä we are trying to do, we are trying to, let's say, explain to the wider audience what can they do, right? And I think that was very great that we have this white paper, and basically these are 5 steps that we believe that countries or companies can take to achieve net zero. because for us, we believe that, that right now, decarbonization is already feasible with the correct technology. We all have the right tools and material right now, and we don't believe that it costs more, because we already have solar, we already have wind, we have energy storage, we have flexible power plant, and we of course have sustainable fuel, like hydrogen and ammonia. So for us, we believe that this is feasible. It's just about how you make it happen. How do you arrange the puzzle? So coming back to these 5 steps. So the first one is adding renewable. So definitely many countries is on track to add renewable, and then the next step is adding balancing, thermal balancer, and energy storage. Third is about phasing out inflexible power plants such as coal. Four is converting gas power plant into using sustainable fuels such as green or blue hydrogen or ammonia. And then finally, the last step, the fifth one, is actually to phase out remaining fossil fuel, because we believe that in a 100% renewable future world, there won't be any fossil fuel. But of course, this is very much far ahead. And those 5 steps is actually based on what is the share of the renewable sources in the system. So as you go higher in the steps, you will of course need to have higher share of renewable. So these are the 5 steps that we were sharing to the larger audience. And maybe this is what Wärtsilä say, right? I mean, this is what we have found, not us say, but this is what we have done modeling intensively using a software called Plexos. So this is what we have achieved by putting the right input, the assumption, and that's where we believe that this is the right step, the 5-step plan. But you did ask me about what is my personal view, right? So for me, this is something that is also very close to my heart, because I have 2 daughters, twin daughters, and also I want that the future that they live in the future, right? That it's also as clean as possible, and they also have a better place to stay, right? And maybe something that maybe I can share more on a personal, Joseph. Earlier this year, my daughter, international school in Japan, actually organized a TEDx talk, right? Where the student community, alumni, and of course the parent community can participate, right? And this is actually, by the way, the recording is on my LinkedIn and on my YouTube. You can have a look. But basically, the topic of that discussion for the international school student was actually be the butterfly, right? And when I hear that topic, be the butterfly, right, it really resonated to me. It was like telling what are the small steps that anyone can do to do the greater good, right? So that's where when I thought about that, I thought that, hey, that's in line with the Wärtsilä story, the Wärtsilä, that 5 step. But then, Joseph, the thing is that it was for TEDx, and of course TEDx, it can't be commercial.
Right.
You can't actually be technical, because you're talking to
general audience,
general, elementary school, middle school, high school, parents, teachers, right? And they will say, what is that? So for me, what I thought that, hey, why not try to twist the story as it. So I did the TEDx using that 5-step, but using very layman term, using, let's say, and I did not mention about the word Wärtsilä, but I was talking as a father. And for me, that was one of the most difficult presentation, because we are all good at what we do, right? We can talk, we talk about our company, but then when you need to talk about something that you do for your company to a younger audience, like students or parents, it's so different. And I needed to prepare so much. I was like, wow, that was going to be very stressful. But in the end, it went great, and I think that it was really good for me to explain this to the let's say the student community, and trying to use various kind of small stories, and one story that I wanted to share is that when I was doing my presentation or preparing my TEDx talk, I somehow, when I type in renewable energy. And I managed to get a picture of, Star Wars. Are you a fan of Star Wars, Joseph? Are you?
Yeah, I
Right.
am.
So I managed to find I don't know why, but a picture of the Death Star,
Mhm.
right? And a picture of Darth Vader being briefed by the Imperial soldiers that, hey, maybe the Death Star should be powered by 100% renewable, right? Free and all that. So for me, maybe of course I can send you the link later, and you will see. And I say at the end of my TEDx talk, well, if Darth Vader can do it, can go renewable on his desktop, so can you, right? So so that was, let's say, how I ended the TEDx talk, and that was, and I think people got it because they say, oh, Death Star, that's a big thing. You need to have renewable. Why not? And yeah, so that was a very interesting, talking about energy transition to younger audiences, which I think for them was, I got good feedback after that student come talk to me, because they also wanted to look at their own project, about energy efficiency, about putting solar panels on the school roofs, all that. So that was, was very happy to actually to be able to kind of, insight, or maybe try to kind of make the student realize that, well, it's not about only us, what I do as a company, but you also as a student, you can do your own things, right? You can also try to, recycle, reuse, reduce, all that, rather, the 3R. But yeah, so it's a topic that concerns everyone, this net zero, this decarbonization.
And I think what's incredibly difficult, whether you're explaining it to a 7-year-old, 15-year-old, or an adult involved in energy, is the fact that when you're talking about clean energy, it's a kaleidoscope of a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know if you agree, but producing energy from fossil fuels is relatively straightforward. I mean, like coal-fired power plant. Whereas when you got renewables, well, your first hurdle is going to be the intermittency, or the frequency issue, as you mentioned earlier, and you've got to address that through energy storage and other solutions. So it makes it a lot more difficult. And I think the whole purpose of this podcast, as well as what I kind of do as my own kind of private project, is to just try to explain to people what are the various pieces of the puzzle for you to understand on how we're going to get to a cleaner future. But anyway, I totally endorse education. I think it's the that's actually the priority. It's really the priority. If we can move on maybe to, so we talked a little bit about we talked quite a bit about Wärtsilä. We talked about kind of the energy transition in your own personal view, and the company views as well. Can we talk a little bit about specific markets? And I think Japan is an incredibly interesting market, because you're talking about 1,000 terawatt hours a year in terms of consumption, so it's not exactly small, and it is a country that is trying to move to cleaner sources of fuel. And of course, it's a country just like Korea and a couple of other regions like Taiwan, where they're 100% reliant on imported fuels as of today, especially after the shutdown of most of the nuclear capacity after Fukushima. So could you tell us first a little bit about the just broad view about the Japanese market today, and where it is at the clean energy level?
Yeah, sure, Joseph. I think, as you know, I've been living in Japan for the last 2 years. Actually, I'm not an expert in Japan, but at least I can give you my view as a foreigner living in Japan or working in Japan. Right? I think Japan has really changed. I think after the Fukushima nuclear disaster was very tragic, but the whole country changed, right? I mean, one, of course, on the energy mix, but also it changed people because, for example, you had, you may not have realized, but now people are going into these cool bees, right? So now you can see people actually are not really wearing suit and tie anymore, right? Or maybe they wear short sleeve because they have been told that, well, now it's cool bees, right? And it's not really the form, because why cool bees? Because when you go to the office, you don't need to have the air conditioner, right? So you can actually use less air condition, so less energy, less fuel. So this is the bigger picture, right? And I think that's where one example that is really, let's say, easy for the audience, general to understand, right? That Japan is going to this concept, right? But then coming back to the energy sector, Japan is committed to address the current climate change. I think you have seen that they started to promote more renewable, in addition of gas. So you can see more wind, more solar project coming up, and Japan has a ambitious target to have its share of renewable within the power mix actually increase to around 36 or 38% by 2030, right? And I think that's great. Also, what Japan did, they have launched this new cross-regional balancing market. It was launched by Octo and Meiti in last year, 2021. And basically, this new balancing market role is actually to bridge the gap between the energy demand and supply during times when there's, too much renewable energy that are being introduced to the system, right? And I think that's a very interesting market that Wärtsilä, is following, and actually, I have the good pleasure also to share with you with others that actually we announced earlier this month that Wärtsilä, we actually will supply gas engine for a new 100 megawatt power plant in Japan, and these fast ramping engine will provide grid balancing and peaking capabilities, which is needed for that balancing market. I think this is this is quite rare, because in the past you always hear about gas engine to do 10, 20, 30 megawatt in terms of the capacity, captive power plant. But now this is very a pioneer case where actually a major power producer and gas supplier has opted for the gas engine technology for such a utility scale power plant of 100 megawatt, which actually its main purpose actually is to hedge the market price fluctuation. And this power plant, when it will be commissioned, it will then be participating in that cross-regional balancing market. So for us, this is something that is very important, because Japan is very advanced. They really focus on the technology. They really are, compared to other countries. I think they're far more technology advanced. The grid is one of the more developed grid, and I think that Japan is kind of, let's say, a mirror or kind of a crystal ball of the future. And I think there are many countries that are trying to follow Japan. And I think that will be a very good reference for us to showcase to the world that, well, as Japan, which has been really reliant on hydro, on coal, on gas, and now they are seeing that in order to have more renewable, they need to have this balancing capacity and using gas. So I think they are leading the way. They are leading the energy transition, and we, Wärtsilä, and myself, I hope that other countries like Vietnam or the Philippines in the region could learn from Japan, because I think if Japan is doing that, I'm sure that they have a good reason. It's not just because they want it, but they have done it through, I'm sure, studies, modeling, and that gas is needed, right? In the past, gas was the base load, but now gas is coming to be its balancer to enable renewable, and I think that's really kind of an example that really show that in the energy transition, gas role will change. And I think Japan, this case that I just mentioned to you, Joseph, is a clear-cut example of what is going to happen in the world, and I think other countries in Southeast Asia should learn from Japan.
Nicolas, is there a price sensitivity? And what I mean by that, I mean Southeast Asia versus Japan, because Japan, if you compare like Japan and Korea, for example, in Japan you have a cost pass-through, right? I mean, like when electricity prices, the cost of your fuel goes up as a generator, the price of electricity in the market rises, and you can pass it on through to the end user. And the Japanese are quite used to that, because it's been happening for a few decades. Whereas in places like Korea, any price increases are kind of absorbed by the utility, and that's why Korea Electric Power has been making losses for the past few quarters. So talking about price, if you agree that Nicolas said in Japan, there's a little bit more tolerance for some kind of volatility in the electricity price at the end user level, do you think that that's a hindrance for other Southeast Asian countries? Because I think in some of the Southeast Asian economies, there is a little bit of price sensitivity. I don't know if my question makes any sense.
Yeah, I think fundamental question. The way I will address that question, I think that other countries like Southeast Asia, I think they are still trying to find their way. I think what they need to do is to really do proper planning, proper modeling or grid study, system study, because Japan, for them, when they came with that market, this balancing market, right? It did not come in overnight, as I mentioned earlier. So I think that, of course, price is always there. I mean, always, people will talk about the price, but this power plant that I just mentioned is going to be 100 megawatt, but it's not going to run base load. It's going to run maybe around only 500 hours per year or less. Basically, it's a backup, right? And basically, you're paying so much money for that asset, but just to stay on standby, right? And yet, our customer decided to invest into that. So it means that they are able to make money. If not, it's not. Yeah. So, of course, I'm not able to share the whole economics and all that, but I think this is what I can say is that definitely there's a clear case of how a customer in Japan who is going to invest in a 100 megawatt gas engine to put in back is able to actually to make money. And I think that's where, we are trying to use that example in other countries like in Vietnam. We tell Vietnam, look, Vietnam 2 years ago, they had this, massive influx of renewable, with the Ep20 5.5 gigawatt, largest ever in the whole world, right? I mean, but then now, they are basically, struggling, right? And there's a curtailment issue. There's a lot of this issue. So that's why, if you look at the latest draft of PDP number 8, or Power Development Plan, PDP number 8 in Vietnam, you have seen that finally they realize that, well, we need some flexibility, and that's where they have introduced gas engine for the first time ever. So I think every country is realizing, and that's why for us, Wärtsilä and myself, that's why I'm traveling around the region to basically educate them, because I've been educating them, raising awareness that you will have this problem. Why don't you see what other countries is doing? Why do you want to just do it your own way? Maybe this is where I always tell them, you have a chance to leapfrog, basically, to future-proof your asset about what other. Don't repeat the mistake that Europe has done, right? Europe has done, many mistakes, and in Asia, because you don't have that install base yet, why not you just, leapfrog them and do something better? And that's where, the problem is, in Southeast Asia, there's of course a lot of politics, government changes, and that's the sad thing, right? They are good, but then when you come to this planning, they will need to take the tough decision, right? Political leaders will need to take tough decision, right? And that's why, all those promises that they make at the Lost COP conference, I'm also very excited, very, eagerly waiting to see what they are going to say, because yes, you say, oh, we achieve, this target by this year, but then they go back, they need to do their work. They need to make sure, because that's where, you need to take tough decision, right? You need to maybe shut down coal-fired plant. You need to increase renewable share. You need to increase investors. But that's the problem, right? Talk is cheap. But I think that, you need to take action, right? You need to, that's why for me, when I talk to these people or to these, I always tell them this is a call for action, right? We are here to help and here to educate. Of course, at the end, you take your own decision. But for us, we are just telling you that, well, there's this technology, there's this thing that maybe you can do. You could help us look at the numbers, and it will speak for itself. And I think look at Japan, look at other countries where they're introducing more and more balancing capacity, right? So this is tough decision, Joseph. It's not an easy decision to make, but I think you need to basically look for the future. Already do things that now that will impact your future. Because if you always to think about next 2 years, well, you will still install, based on power. But then if you want to achieve that net zero, or at least be on the path, I think you need to start to make, those like more renewable, having the market mechanism that, to enable, to incentivize, let's say, the private sector to come and invest, right? Because if you don't have a market, how to you provide incentive or how they can make money, nobody will come, right? So yeah.
No, and government policy is really important for a whole bunch of things. But I mean, number one, energy. You're talking about long duration assets, so you don't, it takes time to build up the capacity, and the capacity is gonna be operating for 20 years in the case of solar or wind, or longer in the case of nuclear. It can be 50 years or beyond. So the government policies are really important. What's really interesting, and I don't know if you agree, Nicolas, but you get some countries in Asia, irrespective of being, whether it's a little bit more autocratic or a little bit more democratic or whatever it is, but some countries are very good with planning, long-term planning, and some countries haven't really had a consistent and transparent policy. I'm thinking of places like Singapore as being one of them, because I talked in a couple of podcasts about Singapore, Japan being another one, Korea generally, but sometimes it kind of goes the wrong way, but generally. Thailand, which is a really interesting one. I don't know if you agree, but they've been very consistent on the energy policy and quite transparent about it, despite the fact the country has seen everything, like coup d'etats and everything else. So I think one of the things that came out in a couple of the podcasts as well is that if you can provide that energy policy, transparency, consistency, and long-term view, actually you reduce the investment risks, which means that you reduce the cost, basically, because your cost of capital is going to come down as well. So in terms of those countries, do you generally agree that some countries do truckloads better than others when it comes to this kind of like
I think I agree with you. Definitely there are some countries that are really leading the energy transition, because for them they want to have a clear mandate, and for them when they make some announcement, it will definitely happen. And I think for me, I maybe I will talk about Singapore. Singapore is a place which is very close to my heart. I mean it's Singapore PR for the last 15 years. My wife and my kids are Singaporean, and I still was living there before I moved to Japan, right? So maybe I can, if you don't mind, Joseph, maybe I can talk a bit more about Singapore, because this is something that is very very important to me. I think Singapore, last week we had the Singapore International Energy Week, so there was a lot of discussion going in town, and everyone in the region in Singapore know that the government will announce some news, right? And last week they announced the national hydrogen strategy. So now I will say that they already say that hydrogen is going to play an important role for Singapore to achieve net zero. So now everyone know that Singapore have this mandate, and there will be some incentive, there will be some policy guidance. So now everyone knows, and I think that was clear up front. So that's how Singapore, they're very transparent. And we know that every year at CU around October, there will be some kind of announcement. So that's how Singapore is. And also Singapore, what they have is that they are very small countries, an island, not much space, available. But Singapore, they always want to be at the forefront of technology investment, right? For example, 4 years ago, they decided, and their approach is very simple. They always go test bed or pilot, right? And then they know that for them to check whether this technology will work or not, they always like to test it. And when you do tests or test bed or pilot, is not commercially viable. And that's why Singapore is doing well. Singapore will incentivize. They say, okay, we will give some grant, we will give you some research money, go and do it. And they know that they need a Singapore company, a local company, and that yet they need foreign expertise, right? And that's why for us, Wärtsilä, we have been supporting Singapore For example, 5 years ago, we were selected to provide the first utility scale energy storage in Singapore. So because they were learning about Singapore, so we have a system now running, and now we are using that system to see how does energy storage perform in such hot and humid country, how it can be used to do frequency regulation. And now, Singapore last week announced that they're going to have 200 megawatt of energy storage in Singapore. So you can see, it started 5 years ago, and then last week they announced this, right? Then 3 years ago they announced that they are going to do a project that is going to be floating, to be they call it the floating living lab. That's by Keppel, and they want to integrate many technology. The regas, the LNG, the solar, the battery, and hydrogen. And then Wärtsilä, we came in and we are glad to support them with two hydrogen ready gas engine can burn up to 25%. That was 3 years ago. And now look what happened again, Joseph. They announced the national strategy for hydrogen. So you see that's a pattern that people in Singapore know. Singapore, when they do something, there's a big picture. It's not just they want to try because they have free money. No, because they know that they want to try, get the international player to come, invest, build the technology. It learns, it gets some result, and then they know, okay, it works. And then, and then in the future, then they will deploy massively, right? So I think this is something that, countries can learn, that in order to develop something, you may not start big, start small, right? Like people say, oh, we're going 100% hydrogen. No, start with 25%. You learn and then you move, right? So I think Singapore is really showing the world, or the whole world actually, about energy transition, right? And I think that, for example, Singapore, they already declared that they have a net zero target and they want to increase the renewable share, but they don't have space, right? They don't have space. So that's why we were looking at floating solar, and now they have a target to basically import up to 4 gigawatts of electricity by 2035 from its neighbors. They already started to import 100 megawatt of renewable energy from Laos for hydro. And they believe that if they continue doing that, by 2035, they will achieve 30%, right? And that's why Singapore is doing. But then, as I make a presentation about that last week, Joseph, and the thing is that, Singapore, there's a term in Singapore, it's called kiasu. I mean, if you live here, people living in Singapore or foreigner living here will know kiasu. Kiasu is scared to lose, right? And basically, Singapore is very famous for that because you don't want to lose out, right? You always want to make everything nicely. You have a backup. So same for energy, right? So they are going to import through cables, right? For cables, subsea cable from the neighbor, 4 gigawatts. But what happened if for some reason, there's some issue on the cable, right? You need power, right? So that's why now, Singapore, through the EMA, the Energy Market Authority, the regulator, they want to ensure sufficient local backup capacity because they want to maintain energy security. They want to maintain this reliability because that will be needed when the import of energy electricity from the neighbors scale up. So that's why they had in May this year, they actually launched an expression of interest, an EOI, to basically get industry players, IPP, Genco, to show their interest how to provide this backup capacity, right? And, so you can see that, I won't go into detail, but at least I hope that you can see that what is Singapore is doing, they are trying to plan long term. They say, okay, we can't add more renewable in the system because we don't have space. So what do? Let's import, right? We import from our neighbors, right? So it's still considered, for them good, right? But then when you import something, you're dependent on others, right? And the thing is, you never know what can happen, right? A war or something. Then you need to have local backup, right? And these are not going to run a lot, right? But yet that's where maybe they're even saying in the EOI document that this could run on gas, like gas engine, or the term that they use, they call it fast response generator. In bracket is diesel generator or gas engine. And this is very controversial. People say, You need diesel, you need gas. Why? But yet this is just backup, and I think it might not run. You may not need it, but you still need it as a backup. And I think that's where Singapore is very serious. When they do something, they always think about what happened if this failed. You need a backup plan, and I think that's where for me it's just a matter of time. I'm sure that if we have a discussion, Joseph, maybe 2-3 years from now in 2025, I'm pretty sure that all these things that we have discussed, this project, might be actually happen already, will happen by then. Because Singapore, it's quite predicted, right? They announce something, a test bed, they announce a policy, they announce an expression of interest. Few years later, a tender comes out, people will go in, will build, and then you will see. So this is something that, again, having this kind of planning is not easy. Singapore is, and I think now you're in Hong Kong, it's all about the people, right?
Right.
It's people, the scholar who put ideas, who try to see and planning, because they don't have land, they don't have natural resources. So what do they have? They have their people, right? And that's where Singapore is always great at planning, and they want to achieve, because Singapore, they don't have natural resources. They import everything from energy, from water from Malaysia, from meat, vegetables. So they depend on their neighbors, and that's why they need to have this, energy security, food security, you name it.
Number one, thanks for all these kind of thoughts. Number one, this is the 20th episode of the Asia Climate Finance Podcast, and Singapore has come up. I wouldn't say in every single podcast, but it is the country that is most kind of discussed. And I think it's not necessarily because it's the gold standard for Asia, but because of its achievement. As you mentioned, it is a very small place at the end of the day. But and we can't say that everything has gone 100% smoothly. And it never does. Nothing does. But relatively speaking, in terms of achievements, it's quite up there. The interesting thing is Singapore. A lot of the stuff is at the end of the day, government driven, whereas in Japan, the private sector is really at the end of the day the guys are putting out the money. So given that, and whatever the Ministry of METI, Ministry of the Economy, Trade and Industry in Japan, they'll give directions and guidelines, but there's no obligations for the private companies to follow. So what do you think is driving the energy transition, decarbonization, and road to net zero in Japan, given that, the government has given guidance, but it's principally driven by the private companies? Tough question.
Really tough. I don't have a, let's say, the exact answer, but let me try. I think the government is not like in Singapore, right? I think it's the private players, all these Japanese trading house, those developers, the big ones are driving it. I think that it's going to happen. I think they realize, because I think those Japanese trading house, they also do business in Singapore. They do business outside, and I think that I'm hoping that they will take the lesson that they have learned while doing international business and try to bring it back locally. I think Japan, where they're heading, I think they are doing, let's say, their best. I heard that now some of them are thinking to maybe restart some nuclear power plant, even coal. So it's not clear. I think it's not, let's say, there's not, let's say, very clear direction. And I think for us, what we can do, Wärtsilä has a small Finnish company in that big ecosystem, is to just to educate, to tell them. And I think at least we have one customer that has realized that, well, to have more renewable, you need to have this balancing technology. So we are hoping that other big group could follow suit, because I'm sure that Japanese, they are very focused on technology, less than price, because for them what is important, that if they see that there's value in the technology, they will lead them there. So for us, we can cross our fingers, Joseph, that Japan will actually finally make a commitment to net zero, because I think in the last COP, the PM did not make any, let's say, commitment. So let's see what happens. I'm sure we will be very pleasantly surprised, because I think now, I'm not an expert in Japan, but as you can see, the yen is pretty weak now. I remember when I moved to Japan, one Singapore dollar was like 77 Japanese yen, and today it's around 105, right? So it's really, the yen is getting weaker, but I think it will rebound, right? I think that the government has other bigger issue, about the COVID. They were fighting for COVID. They only recently opened the boundary, the borders, not the boundaries of the borders. So yeah, I mean, I think energy is, I'm sure, very much on their agenda, and I think for us, we only hope that they start to realize that, yeah, we will need to take some good stand, and hopefully things could change. Like, for example, I read in the news about, I think, was it last month, that they are planning to do some incentive if developers install more energy storage to support the renewable. So yeah, I think these are good, but I think we need to see how this will be deployed. Let's see.
Just not to abuse too much of your time, but I wanted to kind of ask you another tough questions, because it's fun to ask a good friend tough questions. Where do you see energy transition in the next 30 years being most successful in the region, and where do you think it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle, apart from China, apart from Singapore? Because I think those two places, the writing is on the wall. But based on your experience, out of all of the other countries, which one would you be bullish on? And this, of course, is your own personal opinion. Bullish on, and the other one which you think may need extra help.
Okay, tough question. Well, I was going to say Singapore, but you are very smart. You removed that.
I removed Singapore and China. Yes.
I think looking at I think that country which actually should be able to do it, to make it, I think it will be Vietnam and Taiwan. These are countries that are spending a lot of time there. I think they have their power development plan, like the one coming up in Vietnam, the number 8. So I think they are starting to make the right step. I think Taiwan also, they realize that they need more renewable. So now there's offshore wind, which is big time there. So every offshore wind player of the world are now focusing on Taiwan, especially on the offshore wind. As a result, you will need to have energy storage to support. You need to have flexible gas. So I think these are the two countries that will actually be very much, let's say, be able to meet the target. I think is a must. But then the country that actually I feel will be, unfortunately, lagging behind, or the black sheep, I would say, of the whole family, or the ASEAN family, unfortunately, I would need to say Myanmar. Because Myanmar is a country, that, of course, they right now, what they have on the military coup is very sad. What is happening there? I mean, that's already it's close to now, reaching the 2 years anniversary next year. It happened on the 1st of February, 2021, if I'm not wrong, around that date. I still remember, because I just moved into Japan, and I got that news, and all our customers in Myanmar, and also our people who are working on the power plant also could not be reached for a few days. We were worried, right, for the safety. But the thing is that this country, if you look at it, they have almost the same, they are like almost the same population as Thailand, but the thing is that the electrification rate is like maybe 40-50%. So there's a lot of people who actually are not having access to electricity, right? And I think without electricity, you can't have industrialization. You can't have, right? Of course they have hydro, but the thing is that for us, Wärtsilä, we have about close to 500 megawatt of power plant that we are providing actually to the people, right? But now, because of what is happening there, it's very uncertain for not only for us, but for all the international community. You have seen a lot of companies has divested, a lot of oil companies has moved out. And people are just wait and see, waiting on the side, because right now what is happening in the country is sad, right? I mean, there's no direction, and I think if this continue like this, the country will basically be stopped, because I think before this military coup, the country actually we had a lot of tenders. They import LNG, they had a very aggressive solar tenders for gigawatt. They also had a solar hybrid. They were also looking at the hybrid concept, gas and solar. How to make it more to have a very more competitive LCOE. So yeah, but now everything has stopped. Everything has been put on the side. So for me, at least, I see that Myanmar will be lagging behind, and of course, let's see what I can only hope and pray for the best. But sadly, I think that's a country that I don't know what's your view on that, Joseph?
I actually totally agree. I mean, if I would ask you, that question maybe 3, 4, or 5 years ago, which country would you be most bullish on? Probably the top one would have been Myanmar. I mean, there's hardly any installed capacity in the country relative to some of the countries in the neighborhood. If I remember correctly, at one stage they had less installed capacity than Sri Lanka, which is one of the most energy poor countries in the world. And then since then, you've had political changes which are not very conducive to foreign investment, etc. So yeah, I would totally agree on that. Nicolas, I think I probably abused too much of your time, and you've been very, 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 very generous. Thank you so much. Do you have any last thoughts or any wrap up before we close the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, let me think. I think for me, as I mentioned before, the energy transition is not a sprint; it's a marathon, right? It takes time. I think that everyone has a role to play. Every technology has a role to play. You just need to know where and what role they should do, right? Because some technology is good at doing baseload. Some technology is good at providing balancer. But I think at the end of the day, we really need to see how can we address the energy trilemma, right? We need to see how can we address affordability, sustainability, and reliability, right? And I think this energy trilemma should be on everyone's agenda. How can we help countries, companies to decarbonize? And I think that if really everyone, the private sector, the public sector, join hands and make it happen, I think it's possible. But I think what I'm trying to say is that country alone cannot do it. Private sector cannot do it. I think it must be a collaborative effort in that journey. And I think that for us, at least for me, that's where I'm trying to raise awareness to people that I meet, like you. I'm trying to explain, to educate, and of course share our knowledge. And I think for Wärtsilä is giving us the tool, giving me the tools, giving me the opportunity to actually try to do that sharing, because I think this energy transition that we are now, it's everyone's responsibility to do it. And for me, I can't be more than happy today, Joseph, for the opportunity that you have given me to be on your podcast and listening to me for almost 1 hour plus. And I'm very grateful. And I really hope that your audience will find it useful, and we could then still have some discussion after that, separately or offline. Yeah.
Yes, and I will put some of the links, including the white paper on the 5 steps in the show notes. Well, Nicolas, first of all, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and for participating in the Asia Climate Finance podcast today. I wish you very, very safe travels. I know you got lots of business trips. So stay safe and stay well. Thank you so much, Nicolas.
Thanks, Joseph, and stay safe also. See you soon in person. Thank you.
Indeed. See you soon. I hope you did enjoy this episode of the Asia Climate Finance podcast. I would really appreciate any feedback, topic ideas, etc. My contact is in the show notes. Thank you.